Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is the Audio-Technica ATH-ADX5000. A bit of a mouthful of a model number there. But this is an open-back dynamic driver, full-size headphone that is about $2,000 US. This unit was sent to me directly from Audio-Technica. They have asked nothing in return other than a fair and honest evaluation. I will put some links in the description below where you can buy this product. Some of those will be affiliate links, so if you like what I have to say about this product and you want to help support the channel, please consider using one of those affiliate links, and I will get a small kickback, and I only put affiliate link money back into the channel to help keep it running. And this is also a loan. It will be going back to Audio-Technica here in the relatively near future. Now, this is an older model. Early HeadPhi posts for this model date back to about August of 2017, so it has been around, and the market has changed a lot since 2017, and I think that's really going to influence the framing of this review and my bottom line for this product here in October of 2024. So stick around after shameless self-promotion to hear me flesh all of that out.
Hello. I'm one of the reasons that Wave Theory can't spend all of his money on audio gear. He wants you to know that your support is vital for keeping the channel running. So if you enjoy Wave Theory's bussin' review riz and no-cap review style and want to encourage him to stay in the basement so I don't have to listen to his dad jokes as much, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also send him a donation on PayPal or sign up for the Patreon. Links are in the description. Now on to the review.
All right, the ATX5000, again, right about $2,000 US, and my bottom line here on this headphone is that I think it has some merit, but the market has moved beyond what this commands at $2,000. Like in 2017, 2,000 USD may have made sense for this particular unit, but here in late 2024, it's in need of a price cut. All right, so we're going to get into all of that here as the review unfolds, and let me explain like what the merits that it really does have are, and then where I think it would more appropriately slot into the market here in terms of price, and then just a plea to Audio-Technica, it's time to get the price of this thing down. Okay. Some quick specs on this then. Again, it is open back, full-size dynamic driver with 58mm dynamic drivers on it. And if you see in there, like, it is truly open back. When Audio-Technica reached out to me and contacted me about reviewing some of their stuff, they pointed out that, like, this is one of the few truly open back, their words, models on the market right now, along with Hi-Fi Men and a lot of, like, E-Stats and all of that. Just like the entire back of the cup is all grill material basically, so it is a completely open design there. And so that's one, again, in their emails to me, that's one of the design features they pointed out there. The impedance on this one is rated at 420 ohms with 100 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity rating on there. So it's one of a, decreasing number of headphones out there that have a high impedance out there, which makes it friendlier for things like output transformerless or OTL tube amps. So I didn't find its behavior to radically change from solid state to tube amp. I'll unpack that a little bit more later. But for those of you who have an OTL tube amp that you like, and you like what I have to say about the sound signature of this one, then this could be a solid option to consider. Again, it's just the number of high impedance cans out there anymore is decreasing. So like the ones that are out there are worthy of consideration just because they are high impedance and allow you to use those kinds of tube amps. Okay. Beyond that, though, we can just kind of dive into the build and so forth. It is a very light headphone. I neglected to write down the mass of it in front of me, but like it's like under 300 grams, I bet. It's very light. It is well made. It's not a suspension strap headband system, but it's got this dual bar on the headband there. It's got a good, like a nice balance of clamp force to keep it on the head, but not slide around a whole lot. We've got Alcantara pads here that are fairly soft, Okay, I don't think they are angled, and I don't see the driver housing angled in there either. But I mean, it fits my head well anyway. It is very comfortable. It's very open sounding again because it's just completely open back. So like, there's like no attenuation basically of any any ambient sounds, and of course all your music sounds are going to leak out too. So don't expect any kind of isolation, but it's just very open to the surrounding environment and all of that there. So that's one aspect of its design. And then the cable entry. The cable jacks here, they are Audio-Technica's proprietary A2DC connectors. Here's the cable that comes with it that look like this. Okay, on the headphone end, and then the stock cable they send has a 6.35 millimeter or 1/4 inch single-ended termination. I have it coiled up here, but this is a 3 meter or about 10 foot long cable here, stock, and it is somewhat thin-ish, and it's got this nylon fabric coating on the outside of it there. I rarely used it. This style of cable has a bit of memory to it. It's just a little bit too long, not quite supple enough for me. I just didn't really like it that much. So fortunately, Jeremy at Audiophile Ninja came to my rescue, and he sent me a nice, just one of their basic, pure copper cables right there that has the A2DC connectors on the headphone end, and then he gave me a 4.4 millimeter Pentacon on the amp end, which I was able to adapt this to an XLR 4-pin with an ultra short adapter, and then I have a Arctic Cables Magnus pigtail adapter from this 4.4 millimeter to a 6.35 millimeter single-ended connection to fit all the amps. This is what I used. Jeremy told me that he will be offering this option with the A2DC connectors on his website very soon. He's working on getting that put up, so you may not be able to buy it yet as of the release of this video, but it should be within just mere weeks after that you can order that Audio-Technica, or excuse me, that Audiophile Ninja for these Audio-Technica A2DC headphones. All right, but again, the comfort is good. I can wear this physically for a long period of time with no hot spots, okay, no neck soreness, no physical fatigue because of comfort issues on that at all either. The pads, they can get a little bit dusty, and if you have like a pet or something, they can get a little bit hairy too, but nothing of any real concern there, at least not in my opinion, in terms of the upkeep on it or anything like that. All right, let's start turning our attention to the sound then. And so, as I typically do, let's run through some of the test gear that I used. Several different signal chains to drive this. One of them would have been a Schiit Bifrost 2/64 through an Aoun S17 Pro headphone amplifier. The sourcing on that one would have been primarily from the FIO SR11 streamer as a Roon endpoint, then USB connection from the FIO into the Bifrost, okay, then balance connections into the Aoun amplifier, and then that amplifier has a 4.4 millimeter headphone output, so I just use this cable there. I also tried a Cord Hugo 2 with its matching 2-go streamer, also used as a Roon endpoint, and then that's a single-ended connection, so using that as a DAC into my KN-HA1A Mark II tube amp that has a variable output impedance, so I could at least simulate the output impedance of an OTL tube amp to try this with, so I did that a little bit. And then in for review lately, I had the Hollow Audio Bliss amplifier. And then in comparisons, I also used the Hi-Fi-Man Golden Wave Prelude, the Vioelectric HPA V281, and then the big gun that I had there to use would be my new-ish now LTA Z10E. Reviews of many of those have already been published. See links in the description below. The Z10E review is hopefully coming up in the near future. Okay, DACs then would have been Berkeley Alpha for those higher end amps anyway. DACs would have included Berkeley Alpha Series 2, Hollow May KTE, and the Baltic, or the Lampezator Baltic 3. in there, and then those would have been sourced either direct USB to a laptop computer or through a combination of Sonar Ultra Rendu streamers, either direct USB into one of those DACs or from through a Singer SU6 DDC. All music files would have been lossless or high-res FLAC files or DSD files played locally. In the case of FLAC files, some of them would have been streamed from Qobuz, and then basically using Rune for almost all of the listening, but in a few special occasions using Ottervana in the cases where there was a direct USB connection from a computer to a DAC. All right. To further set the stage a little bit on my sound impressions here, I attribute Audio-Technica mostly as like a professional audio brand because they make a lot of pro audio gear, microphones and the like, and then a lot of their headphones are like geared towards the mixing and mastering pro audio kind of crowd. The web page for this unit, though, like on Audio-Technica's website, I went there, and if you do a Control F to just look through the website there, the word professional does not show up. Mix shows up once, but it's not really in the context of like mixing or, you know, doing audio mixing and all of that. So I think this one is a little bit more targeted towards the consumer end of the market here. And so like that kind of helps form my opinion and like where I think this fits into the market as well. So we'll start with the overall tuning and the perceived frequency response of this. And it's a little bit uneven in terms of its tonality and frequency response all through the audible spectrum here. I would say that there is, I mean, it's mostly neutral in its tuning, leaning slightly V. Okay, so neutral V. Now, why would I say such an odd combination of things there? There is a little bit of a boost in like the upper bass, lower mid, so that bass, not sub bass in there, so not the truly deep bass, but kind of like just the bass and mid bass regions have just a little bit of a bump over what sounds like neutral to me. And then there's a little bit of unevenness and a peak somewhere around 3 or 4 kilohertz that kind of makes the treble stand out a little bit too. So, and then there's also, like, at least according to like a lot of the reference tuning curves that are out there, there's a little bit of a recess, I want to say like in the 1.5 to 2 kilohertz range. That may not be completely accurate, but if you look at a frequency response graph, you'll see this. There's a little bit of a bump in the bass region, a little bit of a recess in the lower mids, and a little bit of a forwardness in the upper mids, lower treble. Okay, to the tuning here, and it does get a little ragged as it gets up higher in frequencies there. So like the tonal balance through the treble isn't all that great to my ears. It does sound a little bit thin, a little bit sharp. It is prone to some sibilance, and like cymbal crashes and that sort of thing sound a little bit thin and a little bit brittle to me. They're lacking a little bit of tonal weight just because there is that peak in there. So the tonal balance between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics is just a little bit off up in that range. Likewise, the same is true of the mids. There's a little bit of a recess in there somewhere where it throws off the natural tonal balance of things to my ears. Now, it doesn't really sound shouty or honky a whole lot to me, but it does have a little bit of a hollow tone. And again, vocals, both female and male vocals to me just sound a little bit thin and lacking in a little bit of weight and body to the point where they don't quite sound natural to my ears. All right, there's also a roll-off in the sub-bass there, where just the bass extension is okay, but the presence really starts to roll off. So there's not a whole lot of low-end rumble to the sound either. And with some material, that can kind of, again, throw off the overall tonal balance and, again, just kind of make it sound a little bit thin and lacking in weight and body. All right, so the frequency response there, it is just a little bit ragged. Now, there are going to be some people who like it because the thinness of the vocals and just the way it's tuned, it does make some things stand out. So vocals are pushed forward just a little bit. They can kind of hover in front of the rest of the soundstage. And I know that some people like that effect because they like their vocals to pop. And so this will give you a hint of that. It's not like, it doesn't do that as much as something like an Odyssey MM500 ATH-ADX5000 will do, but it's also like not like a hi-fi man or something else where the vocals are just naturally and more organically part of the mix either. Okay. So like that's your kind of my overview of the frequency response, at least the perceived frequency response of this. And it's going to have, I think, a bit of a niche audience just because of the way it's tuned. And when I first heard it, it kind of doubled down on my impression that this was a more professionally oriented piece. In terms of just the tuning sounded to me like it was made to target problem areas in a lot of mixes. Just the way the mids are presented, the way the treble is presented, it's got the unevenness in those peaks to make certain frequency ranges stand out a little bit more, so that if there's like, you know, if this headphone is sounding sibilant in the mixing and mastering context, you bring that treble down a little bit so that when the mix translates out, it doesn't sound sibilant. And you make the vocals stand out a little bit more. So if you hear something wrong with the like the mid-range spatial presentation or whatever, just something is standing out about it there, you bring it back so that when you translate that mix out, it sounds a little bit more natural and all of that too. And so that's really what I thought it was going for here. But then again, Audio Technica's website doesn't have the word professional, doesn't use the word mix or master in the context of mixing and mastering that I could tell. So I do think it might be a little bit more consumer oriented, but it's tuned more like a lot of the professionally tuned headphone or for professional use headphones that I've heard out there in terms of that. So in terms of at-home end user listening enjoyment, I think it's going to have a rather niche audience there, but there are going to be some who like that kind of tuning. All right, let's get on to the other professional or other presentational aspects of it. The sound staging is on the bigger side, at least in terms of width. It's got some height on it, but like a lot of dynamic drivers, driver headphones, it does not sound particularly tall. It's got some sense of depth and layering in this dimension here as well, but really it's the width that's the star of the show in the soundstage here. The imaging and the separation are solid. There's a good sense of the imaging. Sounds are here, they're here, they're here, they're here. And with separation, sounds are not in between those points that I just pointed to. But it's also like smooth and natural and coherent across that soundstage. It does not sound discretized or anything like that. Okay, so I think like particularly in the width dimension, the soundstage width and the imaging and the separation are one of the strengths and one of the merits of that I talked about of this headphone here. The dynamics are okay. That slight mid-bass bump that I detected there does have some punch to it, but because of the rolled off sub bass, there's not a lot of slam, and so that punch can sound just a little bit weightless, okay, or just a little bit, again, lacking in weight and body. It's more of a pop than a slam kind of a thing to it. So, but I mean, that's not necessarily a problem. It's, you know, it's there. Detail retrieval, texturing, resolution, those kinds of things are okay. They're just no longer $2,000 level. Okay, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit more, well, detail in a moment. There is a decent sense of detail retrieval, resolution, texturing, that sort of thing going on in the sound. It's not really... And it's a little bit uneven in terms of like in those frequency ranges, like in the mids and in the treble that I mentioned where the tonality gets a little bit uneven. And so some frequencies sound like they're emphasized, a little bit overemphasized and all that. In around those frequencies, the detail retrieval can sound quite impressive, but outside of those frequencies, the detail retrieval, the resolution sounds like it's a little bit reserved and subdued. So it's not completely even through the frequency spectrum in terms of like the resolution and the detail that it's pulling out. And so sometimes that was a bit distracting to me when I was listening and like took away from my enjoyment of it as well. Okay, but again, like that might be in the frequency ranges that some end users are preferring and are listening for, and so it may still work for them there on that. Okay, the dynamics and the impact, I mean, like I talked to that, but then the mid-bass a little bit, snare drums have a decent amount of snap to them and all that. So there's still a fair amount of like energy and liveliness to the sound through the frequency spectrum as well. Okay, but overall, like just the tone and the timbre being off, the resolution and the detail retrieval just being a little bit inconsistent, which is also connected to that tone and the frequency response, at least to my ears. Just I struggled to listen to this one for long periods of time without fatigue, and it was uninspiring to me because it just didn't sound very real or natural to my ears. And again, it kept sounding like it was more of a tool headphone designed to pull out flaws in a mix and be used in a professional setting than it was a kick back and listen kind of headphone there at the end of the day. All right. Now that said, let's talk about signal chain pairings for a little bit, then we'll do comparisons to other headphones, and then we'll wrap up where I think it fits in the market here in late 2024. And like you can help it a little bit with signal chains. Like I mentioned a wide variety of chains there earlier. Even though it's high impedance, I did not hear a transformation going from solid state to amplification to tube amplification like you hear from like a Sennheiser HD600 series. It's not going to transform in the way the HD600 or the HD650/6XX do. So don't expect that here. It's still mostly going to be itself, but it does pair well. Like if you have a high output impedance amplifier, like an OTL tube or just a solid state amp that has a switchable output impedance or a high output impedance like that hollow Bliss that I mentioned, you can bump up the output impedance intentionally. You might get a slight shift on this one in terms of its timing aspects, a little bit wetter sound where the decay lingers on just a little bit longer and blends the trailing end of a leading tone into the leading edge of a subsequent tone a little bit more, but not a lot. Okay, it's again not transformational there, but if you have an OTL tube amp that you like, this will work well with it because it is a high impedance can. All right. Because of like the thinner sound, the lacking in weight and body on here, I do think like I had the best experience with this one with a warmer, thicker, fuller, and slammier amplifier. Vioelectric HPA V281 was one of the better matches to this one. The LTA Z10E with the Baltic 3 DAC, because the Baltic 3 introduces a very robust, slammy, present sub bass in it. The Z10E amp is a very neutral amp, so it doesn't have the elevated sub bass, but if the DAC coming into it has that elevated and slammy sub bass, it will let that through, it pass it through no problem. And so that's what the Baltic is. So the combination of the Baltic 3 and the LTA Z10E did sound really good on this one. So it does do some scaling up in terms of quality. And then again, the extra body and tonal weight of that Baltic 3 sound helped this one, helped this headphone out, but didn't quite cure it of those issues that I mentioned. If you are using a signal chain that is already a little bit thinner and lacking in weight to begin with, like that hollow Bliss amp that I mentioned, it's warm in its tuning, but it's oddly thin and lacking in a little bit of weight and body in terms of its presentation, was not a good match to this. I just didn't like that sound really at all. The Hollow May DAC, if you saw my review of that, like kind of has some of those similar characteristics on it. It's a little bit more neutrally tuned, but it's also it just is a little bit thinner, doesn't have a whole lot of weight or body to its sound. And so like even especially the May DAC into the Bliss amp and then into this headphone was just way too thin and lean sounding for me. So I didn't like that combination at all. So the take-home message on all of that is that you can improve the experience if you want, or like personalize the listening experience with this with signal chains. You can get a little bit more weight and body, you can get a little bit more even tone, or you can double down on the aspects of it that it already has that you might be looking for whatever reason, okay? Just because you like that sound, or you're a professional audio use and you're like, hey, that sounds like it might target some of the areas I've been struggling with in my mixes, okay? Then this option is here and it exists for you. Okay. Comparisons with other headphones on the market here in 2024. Okay, and again, that I keep emphasizing here, late 2024. We're into October of 2024 now. And again, the earliest posts about this headphone, it seems like it was launched around August of 2017 or somewhere in, the second half of 2017. So we're 7 years on over the lifespan of this headphone, and it is showing its age relative to the rest of the market. And this is why I say that I think it needs a price cut. Because at $2,000 anymore, you have the Hi-Fi-Man HE1000 SE, you have the Headphone 2, you have the Modhouse Tungsten. Those are open backs that are all excellent. See my reviews for those and my comparison of those three, and those three have really put the squeeze on the rest of the market, both in terms of what's cheaper than them and what's more expensive than them, because they are all excellent performers at their price. I mean, their resolution, their holography, they vary a little bit on their dynamics, their slam and all that. They're all tuned a little bit differently, but they're all pretty close to each other in terms of their resolution and the three-dimensionality of their sound stages, which vary in size. But the three-dimensionality and the accuracy of the imaging and the separation and all of that from those three headphones is really impressive. And they're just kind of leaving behind everything else right now anywhere near that price point, including this unit here. On a technical level, this thing is much closer to like what the Hi-Fi-Man Aria Organic is now, which is now $1,300. So I would say like the technical presentation in terms of resolution, detail retrieval, and like spatial accuracy and all of that is better, is closer to that level. Okay, Hi-Fi-Man or Aria Organic there at $1,300. I prefer the tuning of the Organic. I prefer the dynamic impact of particularly the low end of the Organic on there as well. But on a technical level, in terms of those things that I mentioned, this is closer to that headphone. So I think the price of this one just needs to come down here in late 2017 for it to be at all competitive in the late 2024 market. Okay, and so not quite a 50% price cut, but getting close to that. $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 in there. Still recognizing that it's going to have a niche audience because of just the very specific tuning that it has. Okay, the tuning I don't think is going to have wide appeal, but it will find its niche in that group, but at that price, okay, and with certain signal chains. It's just time to get the price of this down. All right, so that's going to be my review then of the Audio-Technica ATH-ADX5000. It has some strengths, it has some merits, it's going to appeal to a niche audience, but it is too expensive here in late 2024, and the price needs to be more of in the $1,100 to $1,300 range instead of the $2,000 range, in my humble opinion at this point. But thanks to Audio-Technica for sending this over and letting me become familiar with it. Thanks to all of you for watching. This has been my review of the Audio-Technica ATH-ADX5000. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels, like checking out my PayPal and my Patreon. And as always, enjoy the music.